Доброе утро, уважаемые участники.
Good morning, dear participants. Let me welcome everyone and thank you for your participation at the launch event of the project supported by the government of Japan. And this is our Inception meeting. Kazakhstan and Japan are connected by multiple aspects of cooperation, and we are delighted that this beginning of the new projects, that is business and human rights and promoting climate-smart agro-technologies, Kazakhstan will take this tradition forward. So for the welcoming remarks, we would like to invite here Mr. Sohrab Hajimatov, Jun Yamada, Elvira Azimova, and Fabio Piano. Please take your seats at the stage. I would like to give the floor to the acting representative of UNDP in Kazakhstan.
On behalf of the Japanese government, I would like to welcome all of you here at this event arranged by the United Nations Development Program, and I would like to congratulate you on the start of this project. Welcome.
Dear friends, welcome to this remarkable event dedicated to the launch of new projects of UNDP in Kazakhstan that is funded by the government of Japan. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to His Excellency, Mr. Yamada, Ambassador of Japan in Kazakhstan, for the financial support of our joint initiatives. We firmly believe that these joint projects will contribute to enhancement of well-being of Kazakhstanis, supporting social priorities, socio-economic development, systemic support of entrepreneurship that was declared by the government of the country and its leadership last week. Special attention will be paid to implementation of the guiding principles of UN in the field of business. So it's business plus HR that is highly recognized in the field of responsible business and adaptation of climate change, adaptation to climate change by agriculture. Today, UNDP works closely with business community around the globe, underlining the important role of the private sector in the agenda of sustainable development until 2030. At the same time, 11 years ago, adopted guiding principles in the field of human rights will help us integrate environmental and social components of development in business doing. In this regard, it's critically important to mention that in the last few years there were laws adopted in multiple countries that make it mandatory to observe human rights and comprehensive environmental expert review. National plans have been developed that help mitigate business impact on human being and the planet, and the policies is introduced regarding due diligence with relation to the suppliers' behavior. Similar work will be carried out in Kazakhstan with gender aspect bearing in mind and support of state authorities in developing of the national plans and analogous strategies. In this context, Kazakhstan business has to become not only the key driver of economic development, but also it's the holder of the human rights traditions in business. Yesterday, we presented our report on human rights development that once again underlines the importance of our influence on the planet. And we need to reinstate, rebalance our climate, economy, human rights. Today, the climate change affects all countries, and it poses one of the most grave threats. According to a UN estimate, for the past decade, almost 85% of all disasters were caused by extreme weather and climate phenomena. In this context, we highly appreciate the financial support of the government of Japan for the financial support to the environmental program, and also its support towards NDC, National Determined Contribution. We are delighted to see that Kazakhstan is on the right track, fighting the climate change in line with the undertaken commitments within the Paris Agreement and achieving carbon neutrality by 2060. However, bearing in mind the speed of climate changes, it's important to adapt to climate change as early as now. UNDP is proud for its support towards NDC in Kazakhstan, paying special attention to water and food security, protection of its assets to different natural disasters, as well as protection to against climate change. We have a clear roadmap to achieve these adaptation goals. We're happy that our joint project is going to show practically how to implement these goals in life, in real practice. At the end, I would like to underline once again the importance of partnership to achieve common development goals. Only by joint efforts between the state, government, civil society, academia, university, and international organizations will be able to attain sustainable development following the key principles of the Agenda 2030 and not leave everyone behind. UNDP highly values our long-term cooperation with Kazakhstan and is hoping for successful implementation of the planned initiative that were generously supported by the government of Japan. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, dear Sukhrop. Indeed, UNDP is supporting for multiple years different vital projects, and the new projects that are supported by the government of Japan and are being part of the global UNDP projects will contribute significantly to the implementation of the Agenda 2030 and achievement of sustainable development in Kazakhstan. And now, dear participants, let us pass the floor to Jun Yamada, Ambassador Extraordinary Plenipotentiary of Japan to Kazakhstan. Mr. Sukhrop, Ms. Elvira Azimova, Ms. Zulfia Suleimanova, oh, she's going to come, and Mr. Fabio Piana, Deputy Regional Representative of OHCHR. Good morning. My name is Jun Yamada. I'm the ambassador of Japan to Kazakhstan. For the government of Japan and for me personally, it's a great honor and a privilege to be here with you today. That the project aimed at supporting NDCs to achieve zero emissions and sustainable development goals in response to the critical environmental situation, I'm awfully sorry, will be implemented in Kazakhstan with the support of the government of Japan. This project is aimed at improving the human rights standard in relation to business in 17 countries as a new project supported by the government of Japan. By promoting implementation of UN guiding principles on business and human rights, this initiative will enhance the ability of government and business to understand and fulfill their obligations and responsibilities to prevent human rights abuses such as forced labor, land grabbing, discrimination, and so on. On March 16 this year, President of Kazakhstan, Mr. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, in his address, New Kazakhstan, Path of Renewal and Modernization, stated that it is necessary to establish a constitutional code and strengthen other institutions for the protection of human rights. And I'm firmly resolved that implementation of this project is consistent with the human rights policy of the government of Kazakhstan. The support for decarbonization and climate change adaptation measures supports efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and the implementation of nationally determined contributions, NDCs. Japan has been providing aid and assistance to countries around the world for many years. And we are pleased that these projects will reduce the damage caused by the human rights violations done by companies and shall contribute to decarbonization. We are firmly determined to continue and even deepen our cooperation with UNDP and the people of Kazakhstan for smooth implementation and successful completion of this project. Thank you for your attention. Mr. Yamada-san, we also would like to thank the Embassy of Japan for their support towards UNDP projects in Kazakhstan, and we are determined that the projects that we are going to present today at this event, where Kazakhstan participates as part of the global initiative, will lay the foundation for development of the further phases and will lay the way for sustainable and safe development of Kazakhstan. I would like to pass the floor now to the Ombudsperson in Kazakhstan, Ombudsperson for Human Rights in Kazakhstan, Ms. Elvira Azimova. The floor is yours.
Distinguished participants, dear ambassadors, I would like to congratulate all of you on the launch of these two projects. Indeed, these projects have huge significance because right now, when it comes to the issues of business and human rights, they take a central role, especially in terms of keeping the balance, especially in terms of promoting climate-smart agro technologies and projects in this field. And the government pays a special attention to this work. So if we start discussing these projects, then overall, when it comes to these two projects,
it is notable to see that UNDP and the Embassy of Japan, the EU delegation, have always been supportive towards these projects, and that's hugely important. So therefore, these two projects that will be implemented with the support of UNDP and the Embassy of Japan, I hope will also make a considerable contribution, because there is plenty of issues in these two fields. I mean, here it's climate change and human rights. There's plenty of issues there, a lot of difficulties in Kazakhstan. On my part, I have to mention that currently we have not only Ombudsman for Human Rights as part of an HRI, but there are a few other ombudsmen with special mandates. However, unfortunately, there is no commissioner who would protect human rights in the field of business. And we're not talking here about interference in business. What we mean here is independent, responsible attitude, because we imply here not only relations between the employee and employer, or between consumer and manufacturer. It's a multifaceted relation, beginning from development of the technology and consumption. There are multi-dimensional issues, including climate change, that ties it not only with social but also with economic opportunities of an individual, and overall with absolute constitutional freedoms, right to life and to freedom and well-being. And yeah, we always open and welcoming, hailing such projects, and we expressing our readiness to participate in them. There are a few issues here that we would like this project to cover. Certainly, it's important that the project was providing it not only for improvement of legislation, but also raising awareness regarding the best, most successful projects, not only amongst large business, but also with the involvement of small and medium enterprises. Because therefore, unfortunately, in this dimension, there is little information available in Kazakh, in state language, for those who are just beginning their business, or those who are just having any interest in that, who would like to change their occupation. So therefore, it's important not only to set up a bank of data, but also have expert support and methodological guidance. What is pleasant here is that the project provides for a free support, and that is huge, huge opportunity for the farmers who are just making their first serious steps in business and in adaptation to climate change. And another point to make that is not less important, it's involvement of not only business but and agrarians, but also involvement of institutions that are protecting customers' rights, consumers' rights, civil society organizations, so that they could elaborate some prudent approaches towards these issues that the projects will be facing. Here we mean socially meaningful projects that would involve participation of scientists and scholars and specialists, but also some specific entities such as the patent specialists, because branding plays an important role, because I will skip the commercial side, but it's hugely important to maintain the image, the reputational side of this project, and that's a difficult task. And another point to note here is the Institute of Ombudsman. It's Business Ombudsman, it's Insurance Ombudsman, Financial Ombudsman, and Commissioner for Human Rights. Because in this domain, we are your facilitators. We can not only promote, but also raise the importance of such projects amongst populations. So yeah, we are open, we are ready to support the project, including those points that I just mentioned, such as patent attorney or patent agent, patent counsel. So yeah, all these measures that the project is raising now should be addressed in an open, transparent national action plan, and we have to make sure that it was a long-term mechanism, because it's a mechanism of transparency that would afterwards still enable Kazakhstan, even after completion of the project, along with its partners, including business of Japan, will provide for continuation of these initiatives that were undertaken by the projects. And I wish you all the best of success. Thank you very much, Ms. Abakatimo.
Thank you very much for your welcoming remarks and for defining the strategic priorities of Kazakhstan in the field of human rights protection. And we hope that in the background of political and socioeconomic reforms in the field of human rights, these ties with the entrepreneurial activities and the businesses would be established in a more effective manner. With the adoption of the new law on the human rights ombudsman in the Republic of Kazakhstan, and with the expansion of the mandate, as you duly noted, the human rights ombudsman and the private sector expect the Institute of the Ombudsman as well as the National Center for Human Rights to become a reliable partner under new projects. Thank you very much. We were supposed to give our next floor to Madam Suleimanova, but since she's running late and she's attending the government meeting, we'll be able to listen to her welcoming remarks a little bit later once she's here. So, with your permission, I would like to give the floor to For final welcoming remarks, I would like to give the floor to the Deputy Regional Representative of the OHCHR Regional Office in Central Asia, Mr. Fabio Piana. Please, Mr. Piana, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Good morning, dear colleagues, Your Excellencies, distinguished Ombudsman. I hope you can hear me. Yes, we can hear you very well. Does my video work? Unfortunately, I don't see my image, but I don't know what's the cause of this technical issue, but I apologize in advance. So, since you can hear me, let me continue. I would like to thank all of you for this opportunity to witness the launch of this project on business and human rights and promoting climate-smart agro-technologies. I'm sure that the project implementation will be guided by the principles of entrepreneurial activities or the guiding principles on business and human rights. Here we see the support of international and regional organizations, governments, commercial enterprises, industrial circles, and trade unions, as well as the civil society organizations. There are 31 guiding principles that emphasize a few important things, particularly the obligation of the government to protect human rights in business, as well as the responsibility of businesses to have respect for human rights, which can ensure the access to effective human rights protection, especially when it comes to the victims of human rights in business. These guiding principles actually define measures that need to be undertaken by the government in order to observe human rights it provides the action plan for the observance of human rights and offers the set of control indicators in order to make sure that the businesses observe human rights. Despite the fact that these guiding principles are not legally binding, the protection of human rights, especially in the field of entrepreneurship, actually stem from the ratified legally binding agreements. And the businesses have to respect human rights in many countries, and that is reflected either in the national legislation of the countries or in the provisions that businesses are supposed to comply with. And normally, a lot of decisions are implemented through the court rulings. In case of violation, the companies are supposed to take into account the risks for the violation of human rights. And they need to consider that as their legal obligation. The guiding principles do not really say which governments are supposed to implement them. However, the international and regional mechanisms, including the working group of the United Nations Human Rights Council, recommend the governments to develop their national action plans on business and human rights in order to implement these guiding principles. And this plan actually allows to improve the coordination between the government authorities and help identify different options for the regulatory policies. 10 years ago, Kazakhstan made a few attempts to develop such a plan with the active involvement of the Non-Governmental Center for Legal Policy with the support of the UK Embassy. And I really hope that the project that is being launched today by the UNDP with the help of Japan will provide a new impetus to the development of such a national action plan. Facilitation of the guiding principles also means that the companies are supposed to carry out the assessment on the observance of human rights in order to prevent further damage, let's say. And due diligence is the process of the elimination of the possible damage that can be caused in terms of the supply chains. And this process means streaming obligations to the external audience. That means the population that can be affected by the procedures or actions of companies. And since the damage may vary, companies are supposed to carry out such assessments on a regular basis. And in the Central Asian countries, several years ago, there has been some assessment. The assessment included also other countries that allowed to identify the risks of safety and security, private life, freedom of speech, discrimination, health, human trafficking, labor rights, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, it helped identify different opportunities in addition to risks existing in the Central Asian countries. In conclusion, I would like to remind you that the source of expertise on business and human rights, as well as the climate change, well, here, the source includes relevant climatic procedures of the Human Rights Council. And Here we mostly talk about the Human Rights Working Group and the Special Reporter on the protection of human rights in the context of climate change. The mandate of the latter has been established a year ago, and the Special Reporter is in the process of preparing his first climatic report. I would like to wish every success to the project partners in the implementation of this project, and on my part, I am ready to provide any assistance. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Piana. We totally agree with you. The international standards in the field of human rights affect businesses and entrepreneurial activities, and we really hope that the UN guiding principles on business and human rights will be promoted in Kazakhstan in all areas, including businesses, the environmental protection and energy. Thank you very much. We'd like to give our next floor to the Vice Minister of the Ecology, Geology and Natural Resources of Kazakhstan, the National Coordinator on Interaction with the Global Environmental Ecological Fund, Madam Zulfiya Suleimanova. Thank you. Dear colleagues, Your Excellency, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Ministry of the Ecology, Geology and Natural Resources of Kazakhstan, I would like to welcome our participants of the ceremony of the launch of the new project on sustainable business in Kazakhstan, and I would like to express our gratitude to the Japanese government and the United Nations Development Program for their support of this very important work, such as climate change. And climate change and its consequences may be catastrophic, preventing sustainable development and affecting the socioeconomic development of the country. And since Kazakhstan is a party to the Paris Agreement, it's devoted to the implementation of its provisions, and it's intending to reach the zero carbon neutrality, and the strategy up to 2060 has already been adopted. It includes the target indicators for the reduction of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, pursuing the purposes of decarbonization, and of course the relevant procedures of approval are taking place right now. As a result of the decision made in Glasgow, the parties are supposed to reconsider their national contributions. That is why we are completing our work on updating the NDCs, and we plan to present the updated NDCs at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. Our obligations to reduce the emissions down to 15% still remain active, and at the same time, we are going to clarify different events on the implementation of other goals. We also think of adaptation to climate change, especially when it comes to vulnerable economic sectors, and according to the Environmental Code, there are 4 of them. That's water, forestry, agriculture, as well as the civil protection. The legislation has laid grounds for taking measures in order to adapt to climate change consequences, and in order to provide the methodological facilitation, the ministry has developed and confirmed the rules for arranging and implementing the processes for climate change adaptation and mitigation that allow to better understand how each stage is supposed to be implemented. The further stages of climate change mitigation and adaptation, well, this work needs to be done on the regional level, given different vulnerabilities. The agricultural sector is the most vulnerable and the biggest one that is exposed to climate change, and that inevitably leads to financial losses and can serve as a catalyst of migration of the rural population to cities. Of course, there are risks for irrigated agriculture, and that leads to the degradation of pastures. This, again, creates risks for food security and welfare of the farmers. We support projects which are aimed at low-carbon development and mitigation for the agricultural sector, and we think that the project that is being launched today is serving as another important step to increase in sustainability, and that will help create conditions for the Kazakhstani farmers to be better prepared to climate change. It will help them get tools to better adjust to climate change, especially in the context of increase in the climate change mitigation potential. I wish the participants of this event every success. I wish you fruitful work today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Zulfiya Bulatovna, for your support. Would like to thank the Ministry for their assistance in implementing green projects, especially in terms of adaptation to climate change. It is really important, especially from the perspective of the use of innovative approaches to agriculture. I would like to thank our speakers for their welcoming remarks, for their kind words. And now I suggest that we get down to our next part. Dear participants, let us first play a very short video presentation on the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights.
Okay, so the greetings are from Bangkok. So it is my great pleasure to attend this Inception meeting in Kazakhstan. I am Akiko Sato, the liaison officer on business and human rights, and based in Bangkok. For my part, I'd like to share the UNDP global activities on business and human rights and what we will implement in Kazakhstan through our project. Please go to the next slide. So let me revisit the title of our project, which is Promoting Responsible Business Conduct in Target Countries where Japanese companies operate, with a particular focus on promoting human rights due diligence in global supply chains and leveraging the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights for just recovery. So our project will last until the end of March next year and covers the 17 countries, including Kazakhstan, in addition to Japan. Please go to the next slide. So here I'd like to share how the UNDP has developed the agenda of business and human rights in collaboration with relevant agencies. As you know, the UNGP that provides the 3 pillars overall to realize human rights throughout supply chains, which complies state duty to protect human rights, the corporate responsibility to respect human rights, and access to remedy for those whose human rights are violated. For each pillar, UNDP has been working on to make them happen. So for instance, for the first pillar, we are working with the government to implement the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights or relevant policies. And also for the second pillar, we have been working with the private sector to support their implementation of human rights due diligence. And for the the third pillar that we have been working with the relevant institutions such as national human rights institutions to make their effective remedy. At first, our activity on business and human rights started in Asia in 2016, supported by Swedish government, and they expanded to other parts of the world. And now, with our sincere appreciation, our project has been expanded rapidly to the global scale. And also, there are the number of the UN agencies which are also working on business human rights, such as OHCHR, ILO, ILM, UNICEF, UN Women, or the UN Environment, and OECD, with which we have been also closely working on this agenda. Please go to the next slide. So here I like to show the countries that we are working on right now, supported by the 3 donors, the Swedish government, the EU, and also the government of Japan. Please go to the next slide. And these 17 countries are those to which this project is being implemented, including the Kazakhstan. So as you see, we are working on literally on each continent. Please go to the next slide. So before going into the details of the project, I'd like to share the global policy development of business human rights. As you can see on this map, more and more the countries are going for making human rights due diligence mandatory by various ways to ensure the corporate responsibility of respecting human rights are effectively implemented. So they're starting with the UK Modern Slavery Act in 2050, that there are the number of the legislations, including the Australian Modern Slavery Act or the German supply chain law, which will be enacted the next year. And also currently, the EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which is called the CSDD, is under discussion at the EU level. So once this is adopted, there will be a significant impact on not only the business in Europe, but also the business partners there across the globe. And also the following up the development, there are the number of the countries which have adopted National Action Plan. Please go to the next slide. And here, I'd like to also introduce the policy development on business and human rights in Japan. So in 2020, the government of Japan released the National Action Plan on business and human rights, which covers some cross-cutting areas such as the labor issues, the promotion and the protection of children's rights, the human rights associated with the development of new technology, or the rights and roles of the consumers. In addition to these cross-cutting areas, this map also shows its expectation for the private sector to conduct concrete actions in line with the UNGP, which are about the developing the human rights policy, conducting human rights due diligence, and establishing the grievance mechanism. Please go to the next slide. So to what extent now the Japanese companies are carrying out human rights due diligence? Same as most the companies, the human rights due diligence is something a bit new concept for Japanese companies. So here is the outcome of the survey conducted by the Ministry of the Economy, Trade and Industry and Ministry of the Foreign Affairs, Japan, last year. So the result said that the 392 companies out of 760, they have 750 have conducted the human rights due diligence, but mostly within their companies, and not so many have expanded human rights due diligence to its suppliers or business partners abroad. And also this says 122 companies responded to this survey said that the reason why the human rights due diligence have not been conducted yet is because of lack of their understanding of how to implement it. So while the Japanese companies have been aware of the importance of the human rights due diligence, looking at the policy development at a global level, but they're struggling with implementing the human rights due diligence in a more comprehensive way. Please go to the next slide. And also, according to this survey, the companies requested the government to formulate the guidelines, or there's something that they can refer for conducting human rights due diligence. So based on this outcome, the government of Japan has initiated the discussion on developing the guidelines for companies to conduct the human rights due diligence, which is expected to be finalized soon. So the guidelines are not the legislation itself, so it's not mandatory, but at the same time, this is the first the guidelines to be published by the government on the human rights due diligence in Asia. So I hope that these guidelines will enhance their interest among Japanese companies to conduct the human rights due diligence. Please go to the next slide. So with this background, our project is coming to support such requests from companies and to achieve sustainable society by strengthening the capability of companies for human rights due diligence, including its suppliers and business partners in Kazakhstan. So we have the two outcomes in our project. And the first outcome is to promote a just recovery from COVID-19 while preserving the competitiveness of Japanese companies. So the project will strengthen responsible business practices in Japan and 17 target countries through improving the ability and understanding of national authorities, Japanese businesses, suppliers, and partners to carry out the human rights due diligence. So please go to the next slide. So for that, the purpose that we are developing the 3 steps which is called the B+HR Academy. So the output for this output 1, the Japanese companies, their suppliers and partners are supported in their efforts to remain competitive and drive just recovery by ensuring the compliance with human rights standards throughout their supply chains. So here I like to describe the 3-step approach that we are now taking. So the first step is to conduct the context assessment study to identify human rights risks that were commonly faced by Japanese companies and their suppliers and partners in Kazakhstan. The study is confidential and made to inform the curriculum of the human rights due diligence training, which I will explain later. So this first step is quite important because, as I showed in the previous slides, most of the Japanese companies have not conducted human rights due diligence within their suppliers abroad, which means that they still don't know what kind of the human rights risks that they need to tackle by implementing human rights due diligence. So we believe that by their assessment study, we can provide their tangible the information for Japanese companies and their suppliers in Kazakhstan on the human rights issues that they need to take into consideration. And this the context assessment is currently conducted, and also they will be finalized by October this year. And the second step is to carry out the human rights due diligence training, which are tailored to address the common risk faced by Japanese companies and their suppliers, partners operating in Kazakhstan. So the human rights due diligence will be made based on the outcome of the the step 1, the context assessment study. So through the step 1, we will show the information on the human rights risk. And for this, the second step, the step 2, we will provide provide the training on human rights due diligence to tackle the human rights risk. And these trainings will be composed of 3 training courses, and which is scheduled to be done in November to December. I hope that our colleagues will be letting you know the details shortly. And then we have the third step. The step 3 is about offer the closed-door guidance sessions to individual companies, which is about their initial confidential review of their readiness to implement human rights due diligence and on human rights impact assessment. So this is something different from what I described as step 2. So step 2 is about a training course for some number of the companies. But for step 3, we will provide the individual guidance session for each company for implementing furthermore the human rights due diligence. And currently, this is the plan to provide for the 15 or the plus, and also this is the schedule to do the back-to-back with human rights due diligence training. So through these 3 steps, we think that the companies can gain the better understanding on human rights due diligence, and also how to embed the human rights, the respect to human rights into their daily activities. So please go to the next slide. So why our business and human rights, or the B+HR Academy, can meet the request from companies? I'd like to share some features of our B+HR Academy. So the first, this academy will be conducted by a pool of the leading and experienced experts and guest speakers in business and human rights, which will include the national experts in Kazakhstan, international experts, and UN or the UNDP experts. And also this will be practical and also tailor-made training curriculum that fits the Kazakhstan context and also the challenges that Japanese companies are facing. And the cost is also the free and highly confidential expert advice and the expert advice. And sorry, I think that maybe this is typo, but language flexibility in Japanese, as Russian, and Kazakhstan, I believe. And also through this academy, we will update on existing and latest human rights due diligence requirements and expectations, including the CSDD at EU level that I've explained. And also that this academy can be served as an occasion for networking and we will provide acknowledgement as a certificate of participation. And lastly, this is highly deserved and highly appreciated by previous participants. So actually, as I said, we have been working with the private sector to provide the similar training on human rights due diligence before, and the trainings that have been welcomed greatly by the private sector. So we will conduct our activities through this project based on our previous experiences as well. So please go to the next slide. So here I'd like to share the numbers that we have been implementing the human rights due diligence training for the private sector before. So we've already done the human rights due diligence training for the more than 1,000 companies in Asia in 2021. And also we have the more than 7 countries where the human rights training are pilot and provided, which include Thailand, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and India. And as explained previously, we are supported by 3 donors, including the Swedish government, the EU, and the government of Japan. So please go to the next slide. So in addition to this output 1, particularly targeting the private sector, we have also output 2. This is about the policy development by the government of Kazakhstan. So the government and other state authority of the 13 countries are supported in the development or implemented of the national action plans on business and human rights or similar policies. So we will support the conduction of the national baseline assessment on business and human rights that has the primary objective of assessing the current level of implementation of the UNGPs in the Republic of Kazakhstan. And also that we will organize the consultations with all stakeholders and other events to raise awareness on the UNGP on business and human rights. And lastly, we will organize the regional and South-South peer learning meetings and national and regional forums on business on the responsible business. So in 2 weeks, we will organize the regional responsible business forum in Asia and Pacific. So I hope that through this event, our colleagues will learn from each other to how to implement their national action, how to develop the national action plan, as well as how to conduct human rights, how to support their private sector as well. So in my conclusion, I like to emphasize the meaning of this project by saying that our project is the meeting the gap between the current the global policy development on business and human rights, and also there are demand from the companies to meet this gap. So through the implementation of our project, that we are eager to work with the relevant partners, including the private sector and also the CSOs and human rights institution to enhance the capability of the private sector to achieve and realize the sustainable society for all. Thank you for listening.
Well, Ms. Sato,
Уважаемая
we
госпожа
kindly thank you for
Сато,
detailed
благодаря
presentation of the project. We are aware about the success and difficulties in other countries, including in Japan, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia, and we certainly hope to learn these lessons that were earlier accumulated in other countries and implemented during the project in Kazakhstan. So please write down your questions and you will be able to ask them when we move to Q&A. And now let me show you the video about NDC, that's promotion of smart technologies, and I would like to invite Natalia Vasilieva, who is the coordinator of the global group GSB for climate strategies and policy. And we move to video now, which is going to be about promotion of climate smart agro-technologies and NDCs.
Guests, welcome to this launch ceremony event dedicated to the launch of the Japan-supported UNDP project. And it's really great to hear about the news about NDC submission plans by Kazakhstan government. I would like to present in brief the overview on UNDP's support on climate action through Climate Promise JSB project. So NDCs, nationally determined contributions, are at the heart of the Paris Agreement, and they present not just a pledge from countries on climate action, but they also offer a key political signal on the direction of sustainable development that countries plan to take. Thus, efforts by each country to reduce national emissions and adapt to the impacts of climate change are crucial steps on the pathway to net zero. The specific NDC targets on energy, adaptation, nature-based solutions, gender, and other areas also provide a national pathway to transform economies and societies. In an effort to help countries to define and strengthen these pledges towards more ambition, at the 2019 Secretary General's Climate Action Summit, UNDP announced its support to at least 100 countries to enhance their NDCs. So today, UNDP's Climate Promise is the world's largest offer of support to countries on NDC development and implementation. Currently, we are supporting 120 countries, and this represents 80% of all developing countries' NDCs and around 30% of global emissions. The Climate Promise works with over 35 partners, including UNFCCC, UNEP, FAO, World Bank, ILO, and others. So as of July 2022, 100 Climate Promise countries submitted their NDCs, and that represents about 22% of global GHG emissions and 84% of all developing countries' emissions. So the submitted NDCs show that they have been enhanced, and 89% increased mitigation ambition. 100 of them include energy. 95% increased their adaptation ambition, and many of them linked to NAPs. 96% included gender considerations, and 97% included youth considerations. So overall, NDCs are of higher quality with better data, detailed costing, and linked to development and sectoral planning. More than half of Climate Promise countries link NDCs and COVID-19 green recovery. And also the global campaign to raise political will and mobilize society through the flagship mission 1.5 and People's Climate Vote initiatives. So on this slide, apologies, I think it's quite hard to see that, but we tried to reflect the most ambitious NDCs submitted with support of UNDP's Climate Promise. We do understand that it's crucial to continue the momentum, and once the NDCs are developed and submitted, it's important to implement them. So now the next chapter of Climate Promise, from pledge to impact, is focused on the next 5 years. So that's 2022, 2026. And we aim to respond to the overwhelming demand for support in shifting from NDC revision to NDC implementation. This phase of the Climate Promise was launched at COP26. So now we aim to support 100 countries to use their NDCs as sovereign funds for investment in key engines of sustainable development. And this will be a major contribution to the NDC partnership. Also, leveraging the NDCs as an umbrella, UNDP will bring together its extensive infrastructure, networks, and breadth of substantive offers to provide comprehensive support on NDC implementation. Also, it will be underpinned by strong support to green COVID-19 recovery measures. So in March this year, Japan became the largest supporter of this phase of the groundbreaking initiative and joined the long-standing funding partners of Climate Promise, such as Germany, Sweden, EU, Spain, Italy, and as well the new funding partners, such as United Kingdom, Belgium, Iceland, and Portugal, to accelerate these efforts in collaboration with the NDC partnership. So Japan's contribution supports UNDP's work on the ground in 23 countries and territories to realize national targets across Asia-Pacific, Europe, and Central Asia, Africa, and Arab state regions. It will accelerate climate action that leads to clean energy and net zero pathways and help vulnerable communities and fragile settings to be more resilient to climate impacts. So the Climate Promise JSB project covers the variety of aspects to deliver mitigation and adaptation activities tailored to the needs of the countries. We define two pillars to frame country-driven interventions. The first pillar is clean energy and net zero pathways, focused on mitigation support. And the second pillar is helping vulnerable and fragile settings to be more resilient to climate impacts. Otherwise, we can say adaptation activities. So the Climate Promise Global Proposal served as the chapeau for 23 country-level implementation plans, and the overall implementation of the projects will be reviewed through the core indicators. Right now, we do expect that the global project overall will benefit to approximately 224,000 people directly and over 20 million people indirectly, also impacting the social and environmental aspects and improving the livelihood of people. So just a brief overview of the other projects in the regions of here in Europe and Central Asia. So Albania is focusing on removing the market barriers and facilitating penetration of the solar PV technologies. Armenia is focusing on improvement of hydrometeorological data analysis, and as well user-friendly digital access to weather forecast and risk information for people. Azerbaijan focuses on improvement of energy efficiency in two cities, Ganj and Barda. And Bosnia and Herzegovina takes initial steps towards introducing a just transition mechanism, which is a very important one, as it envisages as NDC envisages the reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions, and obviously that would result in the economic structural changes. So then the just transition mechanism is a very important one, and Bosnia and Herzegovina is one of the pioneers in regards to introduction just transition principles on the ground. Georgia supports the sustainable and climate-friendly forest management practices. Kazakhstan, in brief, we have already heard about the project idea, but and my colleague Saulet will talk a bit more about that, about the project. But the idea is to introduce the climate smart agriculture technologies on the ground. Kosovo has a focus of connecting green and just recovery from COVID-19. Serbia is as well one of the pioneers in regards to just green transition and decarbonization. Tajikistan focuses on adaptation and practical risk reduction interventions and eco-based solutions for the watershed management of the Tabale River. Turkey has a focus on the waste management activities, focused on the marine litter. And Uzbekistan they are working already on the climate resilient livelihoods of horticultural producers in Fergana Valley. So we do have as well the projects in Asia-Pacific countries, in the Asia-Pacific region. One of them is in Bhutan, and it's focused on the promotion of the electric vehicles. India is a complex project which focuses on mitigation technologies in the agriculture sector, in the transport sector, also approached the introduction of the just transition principles and focused on creation of the green jobs in the transport sector, as well as MSME, health, and agriculture sectors. Also, they support the community-based adaptation and livelihood diversification. Other countries include Indonesia and with the focus on development of the ETS, Maldives with a focus on development of the MRV system and promotion of renewable energy technologies in tourism, agriculture, and transport sectors. Nepal is focused on enhancing access to affordable and reliable renewable energy in 3 provinces, and as well, they support creation of the green jobs. Philippines support the shift to a circular economic model, basically tackling the problem of the marine litter. Vietnam focus on development of the national ecosystem for the electric vehicles. Also, we do have several projects in Africa region, in Kenya, Malawi, and Namibia. Kenya is a complex project focused on sustainable tree growing and forest management. Malawi is focused on implementation of climate resilient infrastructure technologies related to energy for greening the economy. Also, they have a component dedicated to the forestry landscape restoration measures, and they aim to improve climate resilient agriculture practices. Namibia is focused on development of the ETS. And also we do have one project in the Arab state region, which is technically as well located in Africa, Egypt. So Egyptian project is focused on installation of rooftop PV systems, and as well they plan to deliver the water desalination plant to procure potable water. So thank you so much for your attention. I will give the floor here to Saulet to present.
Natalia, thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to Saulet Sakyanov, the project manager in the Republic of Kazakhstan. Good day. My name is Saulet Sakyanov and I work for UNDP. I work in the group of project on the climate change of the United Nations Development Program. I've been working here for many years already, and I would like to tell you briefly about the project that we're launching today together with you. And I really hope that everyone who is sitting here is there to help us, and I hopefully we will be able to implement this project quite quickly and effectively. Yes, this slide. So the project, well, we have this tradition in UNDP. We normally have really long project titles in order to include everything in the title, but as a person who is more, let's say, active here, I really like brief titles. It says here the use of the climatically optimized agri-technologies in Kazakhstan, but a longer version says the use of the NDCs to achieve net zero and sustainable development in response to the emergency climatic situation. So here we try to support those series of smaller projects which were implemented in Kazakhstan. They've been implemented for 3 years already, and they actually aimed at increasing the ambitions of Kazakhstan for Kazakhstan to fulfill its Paris Agreement provisions on adaptation to climate change and on mitigation of climate change. We decided to focus on the agricultural sector because I've been involved in climate change projects for a while already, but when preparing this PowerPoint presentation, I decided to look at some statistical information in order to see what are the greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture. And as it turns out, the agricultural sector ranks second in Kazakhstan in terms of GHG emissions, coming after the energy sector. I always thought that the industrial processes came second, thinking of plants and factories, but it turned out that it's agriculture that comes second. And when we've been preparing for this project, we realized that that there is the greenhouse gas emission system in Kazakhstan that is mostly intended for oil and gas, energy, and industrial sectors. And the enterprises there have their goals on the reduction of GHG emissions, whereas the agricultural sector is not included. Even if this sector has the second largest GHG emissions in the country. Agricultural sector does not have any limitations of GHG emissions. Therefore, we'd like to demonstrate some technologies that will help ensure the reduction of GHG emissions, and that will be done through the renewable energy sources. We also analyzed within the framework of our research, we've made the analysis, and it turned out that the agricultural sector is the most vulnerable to climate change. So we carried out this vulnerability assessment, and it turned out that the yield of grain crops in Kazakhstan with the modern agricultural system or agri-technical system may go down may go up from 13 to 37% by 2030 and from 20 to 48% by 2050. If we do not adjust our technologies and if we do not change them, so I decided to use the facts on the yield of grain crops, and it turned out that in 2021 there has been some reduction in yield by 14% in Kazakhstan, and that's really sad because probably this momentum is going to be maintained. But I believe that we can overcome these issues. Also, the pastures that serve as a foundation for livestock breeding will be subject to risks of degradation because the number of livestock that is being bred on pastures will not have enough, let's say, yield, and the pastures will degrade by from 10 to 30%. In the mountainous areas, this indicator will be higher because those areas are more vulnerable to climate change. That means that by 2050, the burden on pastures will be reduced from 15 to 30%, whereas in the mountainous areas, this indicator will account for 42%. As you understand, the pastures are not only used by livestock, they're used by wild animals as well. So here we need to take into account the ecosystems, because if we don't think of the quality of pastures, then we may lose not only the quality livestock in Kazakhstan, or we may implicate the plants for livestock breeding. That will create this threat for biodiversity in Kazakhstan, especially for herbivorous animals. And so that will lead to the reduction of the number of livestock. That is why we decided to focus on the agricultural sector in order to demonstrate different practices that can be used here. The main areas for the project implementation, I briefly mentioned this. Component number one includes the components or the technologies for agriculture. Here we're going to use the renewable energy sources. The component number two includes the technological development of Kazgidromet. We actually started negotiations with them. I want to thank Kazgidromet for their help, and together with them, we will be defining the needs of our republic to improve the Kazgidromet system, especially to prevent droughts. We will create or ensure so-called jobs, technological jobs. Any weatherman, a meteorological expert, or person who works in the agricultural sector is supposed to have his own workplace in order to be supplied with necessary information, data, and models, and we'll try to create such workplaces. We will try to create the entire infrastructure, and we will enhance the technical potential. The component number one means holding negotiations with the National Chamber of Entrepreneurs, Atomican. I'd like to thank them for their help and for their quick response to our requests. Together with Atomican, we will define the project territories or sites where we will implement this project. Kazhydromet is gonna help us to determine their project sites as well. We will select technologies. Mostly these will be the RE technologies and technologies to adapt to climate change. For example, we will focus on the technologies that help us reduce losses during irrigation because water is the most important factor or the most important resource and the most vulnerable one, especially because of this rapid evaporation and because of the climate change overall. We'll keep working with other partners such as the non-governmental organizations or associations which will be actively involved in this work. And hopefully we will jointly implement this project. Next slide, please. For the time being, what has already been done? Well, we are holding negotiations with the Japanese Hydrometeorological Service. We will establish contacts with Japan because the project itself was initiated through the Japanese funds, and we really want the Japanese technologies and the Japanese science to be involved. This is one of our objectives. We also carried out the assessment of a partner on the implementation of component number 1. And here we work with the National Chamber of Entrepreneurs, Atomican, and we define the objectives. We also defined the pilot regions of Kazakhstan for both components. For component number 1, we picked the northern Kazakhstan region because it's the agricultural region. We also picked Aktobe region. It's one of the regions which is exposed to climate change. It's the eastern Kazakhstan region where we have the forestry development as well as the agriculture. Zhetesu region, the newly created Zhetesu region, has the irrigated agriculture. And for component 2, we selected Mangistau region. In the past, we've observed a lot of droughts there, and these droughts are becoming even more dangerous. And then we also chose Almaty, Kostanay, and Pavlodar region. Why did we choose these regions? Because of the number of research done by Kazhydromet there, and they have a lot of information, a lot of data. I cannot say that these are the data from the obsolete hydro power plants, but we have observations. We also work with JICA. We try to attract them to the implementation of this project. So I'd like to thank the Japanese embassy for their participation. We held negotiations with the ADRC based in Koba, and this center helps countries overcome the emergency consequences or help countries prevent emergency situations. We work with Kazhydromet.
We're working closely with Kazhydromet to build the capacity of our hydromet service. Around 1,000 farmers will gain direct benefits out of this project, and around 100,000 will be covered indirectly via awareness raising, information system, and via information campaign. We're developing a strategy for public campaign, public awareness raising. We have a colleague with strong expertise who is helping us out, and we'll do our best to project be as vocal as possible, let itself known, and we hope it's not the last one in the field of climate promise and the field of Japan funding. And maybe there's others projects to follow that will be aimed at similar or other goals. So that's it from my side. Here are my contact details. If anyone needs, I will have my business card on me. And thank you very much, and all the best. Thank you very much, dear Saulet. I would like to thank Natalia. She shared with us really substantial overview of the climate project. within this initiative, and it clearly opens up an opportunity for multiple countries to exchange experience, to see what's going on in other countries and learn from each other. And just like Saulet ably mentioned, we will be closely coordinating our actions with the embassy, with JICA, and staying open for cooperation with Japanese companies that are present in Kazakhstan. We're now moving on to the next part of our event. We will now have a panel discussion on the topic importance of sustainable business promotion and with human rights in mind and adaptation to climate change for the purpose of sustainable development. I would like to invite the speakers, Mr. Yankaustis, Alimbayeva, Mr. Yesineev, and would like to pass the floor to Gulmira Tulisbayeva, manager of dear participants. And we're moving out to our panel discussion. Let us all thank you for your presence and active participation, and we're going to discuss some relevant topics related to both projects that are funded by the government of Japan. We spoke a lot with you today about the UN guiding principles in the field of due diligence that were adopted by the Council for Human Rights of UN, and they are forming so-called platform or framework for all companies in the field of business, so that the standards of human rights were observed and upheld by business in the course of the operation. As far as we know, the EU countries are also drafting such document. In April 2020, the EU Commission has announced implementation of mandatory rules of due diligence in human rights and environment for EU countries, and this work is going on. And we know that just this year was repetitively announced that a special resolution or directive is coming out soon. With us we have Kęstutis Jankauskas. He is the EU ambassador to Kazakhstan, and probably he would let us know more about the importance of such directive and the corporate standards. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Good morning, everyone. I have a substantial speech with 4 pages in English, but as far as I can see, this panel is designed to be interactive with a discussion, so I will try to be brief, and I will just like to throw at you a few topics for the further discussion. First of all, the projects that are being launched here today by the UNDP and Japan, government of Japan, they are highly needed, critical for Kazakhstan. And what my previous colleague told you about the agriculture, we see that it's highly practical and can easily be applied today. EU is the top investor and the trade partner of Kazakhstan. And I would like to underline this word partners, because we are certainly interested in seeing development of cooperation. And when we speak about energy, the Green Deal, we won't be able to pull that off alone. And we need our partners, and in the face of Kazakhstan, we see such partner represented by Kazakhstan. We need it, absolutely, and the people of Kazakhstan need it, and the whole planet needs it. Japan, when we look at them and the government which supports these projects, the human rights and the guiding principles and the standards for environmental protection, the Green Deal, and so on. In the current geopolitical situation, we frequently hear, and we hear a lot about the West, as a combination. It's not the West. We often say the EU, and it's not only EU, it's not only US, it's far more countries, it's Asian countries, and so on. So these are the countries that has aspirations for high standards, first of all, for its own people of our countries, because the human rights are universal, and because currently these countries are acting in favor of protecting human rights. And it's not the West as a generalized character, as a composite character, but these are the countries that would like to abide by the law and stick to human rights. So what is you doing? I will not list all the programs, the regional that been lasting for dozens of years, and we have a bilateral fund now, foundation, plus we have a agreement about trade and cooperation that's been implemented, and this fund is going to help to introduce this agreement with a special focus in two domains. It's sustainable economic development and the rule of law. These are the two main pillars. We all heard the message of the president, the address of the president on the 1st of September, where he congratulated us with the new academic year, and he opened up a new political season. And in his address, I heard many times the focus about fair distribution, about justice, investment in human capital, which implies education, investment, healthcare investment, and so on. As of today, as it stands, Kazakhstan looks pretty decent in terms of international ratings. So it's in the top third of countries in the world. But what we need for us, for the leading ones, to progress ahead, including our business, so that around the globe we could see fair competition. Fair competition for each type of business. We frequently mentioned environmental standards in the field of human rights, and in our conversations with Ms. Azimova, it encompasses the political realm, but the human rights is not only right to political elections, meetings, assemblies, and so on. These are our rights that begin with everyday business, everyday activity, with standards like what we eat for breakfast, how we work, what are our labor conditions, what are our what is our housing environment, and so forth and so on. And every time we go to work, to the store, do we buy the products that were tested first at animals, in animals? Does that matter at all? Do we buy those brands that contaminate the environment? Maybe it's far away, but maybe it's just in the immediate vicinity. So what is our attitude? What is our response to that? I guess you all saw the video about blood diamonds. Does that really matter to us or not? And how about our everyday suits? Are they tailored with child labor? Are they suited with child labor or not? Do we value more environmentally friendly products? We lean more in favor of ecologically clean. It matters, first of all, for our health. That's absolutely obvious. But how were they grown? With what technologies? How they pollute and contaminate the environment? Maybe it's just by our side, by our house. And that the directive that you mentioned in English, it's called Directive on Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence. In Russian, it was translated as Directive of Due Diligence for Corporate Sustainability. What does this mean? It means that those companies, those enterprises of EU that are registered in EU will have to submit a report on how they rate not only their own performance, but as well as the performance of their partners, what we also see as value chain from the standpoint of the adherence to international human rights standards and environmental standards, Green Deal, and so on. So those parameters, taxonometry, CBAM, that was repeatedly mentioned here. So the mechanism of a carbon boundary administration, that's going to be crucially important for Kazakhstan in the nearest future, a carbon border adjustment mechanism, and so on. So these parameters were incorporated there. So it will cover business with a turnover of 150 million euro. This is big business, it's a lot, but also businesses from 40 million euro, it's 20 billion tenge, right? Which operate in clothing manufacturing, and not only that, and also in extracting sector. So those European companies that are extracting oil in Kazakhstan, they will be obliged to submit their reports. So once the name of the company will be pronounced, you can be reassured that the company seeks to the highest environmental and human rights standards. Those companies, foreign companies that are having turnover in EU countries would also be subject to this directive. In general, this should be helpful for more fair competition among business and application of more stringent standards around the globe, including for Kazakhstan, that is striving to develop its own industry and also establish closer ties with EU countries. It's using our corridor, our trade ties and links. I hope we will deepen our partnership in the future, which, according to our contract, our agreement, will be able to export to our countries and draw and attract those technologies that you want from the EU. So with the help of this directive, all of us will be able to set the rules of competition, the rules of care over environment, and the rules of human rights. The special representative will see even more amount of work. She has the network of offices spread all over the country, and we'll be happy to support that too. And yeah, thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador of the EU to Kazakhstan. I would like to remind for everyone that the EU is our long-standing partner of UNDP in Kazakhstan. We used to have joint projects in green economy, and currently we promote sustainable development goals and also support Afghan women, their education. And we hope that as part of our two new projects, we will continue our cooperation and even set the path for the new avenues of cooperation. Yeah, thank you for joining, Ms. Azimova. Indeed, the Institute of the Commissioner is expanding, and in line with the new law, we will have new regional offices of the Commissioner for Human Rights. I know that you're now recruiting your staff for these regional centers. If you can please let us know what else besides the Commissioner Institute could act as a mechanism for protection of human rights, in case the rights were violated by enterprises, by companies. Who else they can recourse to? Because you seem to be one of the most essential platform and pillar in promoting guiding principles of UN in protecting human rights in business. On top of what we say regarding the responsibility of the state, corporate responsibility of business, we also say we need to develop a mechanism for protection of human rights of business, including at corporate level. Last year in June, we celebrated 10-year anniversary of the guiding principle adoption. I must say that we are seeing a new emerging trend among ombudsman offices. It's not only commissioners, but these are different commissions. There's some collective bodies, because in some countries it's a collective body. It's not a single person institution who holds it all in his or her hands. The mandate is spread across the office. In almost 40 countries, such institutions are set up, and of them accredited 140 countries. And in this regard, we are witnessing a new emerging trend, namely the discussion of observing the human rights in business is now discussed with Turkic-speaking countries, with the ombudsman of Islamic countries, and now on the agenda we are having Shanghai Cooperation Organization ombudsman. So what matters here is to achieve proper understanding of other entities that play the role of executors, those who need to abide by these rights, or the consumers. What kind of claims do we receive if we analyze the last 3 years? Starting from the period of strict lockdown, over there we had a huge spike of complaints from the employees and the service sector that their rights were not observed, and those social guarantees that were provided by the labor contracts, unfortunately, they were breached, they were violated. What was good is that the majority of these claims were related to individual and small enterprises, individual entrepreneurs. Large business was undertaking social responsibility and were ensuring this temporary mechanism, this cushion of protection. And therefore, in this regard, the government was taking all necessary measures to support individual entrepreneurs and small business. Whether it was effective, I think you're in a better position to judge.
The second category of the addresses that we received included the addresses or complaints related to the entrepreneurs themselves, and we keep receiving them, mostly because this is not related to the absolute human rights, but because it's related to one and only right, which is the right to justice. And here I understand the businesses, because in fact, very serious questions about illegal criminal prosecution and fraud have been raised. Nevertheless, our principle is as follows. We never decline such complaints. We provide consultations because unfortunately we don't have enough information about those institutes that people can go to for the protection of their rights. And in this regard, the small and medium businesses are not an exception, because people come to us once they went through different instances, and once they don't have any financial opportunities to move on. So that means that they need some support for at least to be able to have the third party declare about their rights. And the constitutional law that is being actively discussed in the lower chamber of parliament in Majlis, we supported the suggestion of the members of parliament to include the functions that were not prescribed by the law adopted in December of last year, particularly the involvement of the human rights ombudsman in settling conflicts and disputes through the mediation institutes with the engagement of the government authorities, citizens, and other subjects. The development and a relevant set of recommendations would be provided. This actually meets the principles of the Venice Commission. We understand that this means certain responsibility, but we need to start this process anyway, because unfortunately in businesses, well, there used to be the ombudsman for the protection of the rights of entrepreneurs, but there is no ombudsman for the protection of human rights in business. Why do we need this? Well, I believe that there is a certain peculiarity. There are business councils, there are a lot of associations that need business and human rights protection. And if we look at the legislation, it's presume that we need to have the principles of self-regulation. Unfortunately, we still do not observe this corporate spirit, and in fact, if we look at it, we allow some nuances or opportunities for the government authorities or the state sector to interfere with the business processes that can affect the human rights protection. So, under the second category of complaints, we believe our mission is to provide assistance in forming such institutes of responsible attitude, in order to maybe resort to mediation as another option. Unfortunately, the law on mediation is not applied commonly, and the law on the protection of consumers' rights also needs to be significantly improved. Therefore, it is really important to involve the organizations that protect the rights of entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, we do not have a very strong player across different human rights organizations or the organizations that protect the rights of consumers. I mean, the organizations who could talk to businesses on par. So, since we don't have any associated or affiliated stakeholders within relevant entities or organizations, I believe that it would be really good to have at least one or two organizations very well known to the population who could establish a better dialogue. So, within the framework of these two projects, we believe that the awareness-raising campaign will be even more productive. The third category of requests or complaints that we receive, unfortunately, are now increasing in their number, but we believe that in the next 3 years we will focus more on this issue, particularly the enhancement of the competencies of the local self-governance bodies, as well as local authorities. Hopefully, the fourth budget year and the election system will be fully integrated. So the third category of complaints are related mostly to the conflicts between local communities and businesses. Right now, we see some high-profile cases in the mass media and social media, but it seems to me that it is really important to focus on these issues, because it's the double-edged sword. Because if the rational business works properly, then it needs to assess some risks of lack of support of on the part of the local community for doing business in certain territories. And we see a lot of examples when certain companies bear a lot of risks, not only at the initial stages of their work, but once the project has already been launched. That is why we need to take into account those risks, and in this regard, it is really important for us, in addition to the integration of corporate standards in the field of human rights, to focus more on the awareness raising of the local communities. so that they learn more about some projects that can positively affect their livelihoods. That is really important in terms of getting support from the local communities. If we talk about the integration of human rights standards, in fact, this is a win-win situation for everyone. But it's another question on how to make it more cost-effective. For example, there has been some research that was conducted prior to UN guiding principles. And this research served as a good foundation for the development of the UN guiding principles. Back in 2020, more than 60% of the corporate standards, by the way, according to the European auditors, were devoted to the standards in the field of human rights. That is why it's crystal clear that the cost of products in the market is going up, provided there are specific contributions to the observance of these standards. And second, the sustainability of HR resources matters a lot. I have defined for myself the age group. I don't want to offend people of my generation or of my age, but if you notice, there are a few of us here, and that's the Kazakh reality. I often meet a lot of young people who are interested in these projects. Unfortunately, I did not meet a lot of people with relevant resources who could contribute to the launch of such projects. That is why it is obvious that people who are attending this meeting today will be interested in the opportunities for continuing such projects in the future. But on the other hand, this is a good reason for us to start thinking. Even if we say that on the legislative level we have requirements to observance of the rights of consumers, and the rights of consumers mean human rights. In fact, we see that it does not really work well in practice. And we understand what are the reasons for that, what are the causes, and it will make no sense to start discussions on this point, because this platform, from the standpoint of your professional interests and competences, is intended for a more serious dialogue. And I can only say here that our understanding needs to be expanded. I mean, not only the legislation can regulate these issues, we really need to develop the understanding on the part of the government authorities. The businesses may have really good understanding, but they don't get any understanding on the part of the government authorities. Therefore, these problems I find the most important ones, and I just wanted to reflect on these problems. One last thing. Of course, it is really important to pay attention to human resources. If a person has a really good job, with a really good social package, he or she will always try to improve his competences and qualifications, and demonstrate some ideas which could be quite interesting to his or her employer. Therefore, from this standpoint, this is another area aimed at the development of inner competencies. Unfortunately, migration, mostly domestic migration, and I'm not talking about the external migration or the external flows of workforce. If we just focus on the internal migration, unfortunately, it's stipulated by low competences or qualifications, and therefore our employers are not really interested in such human resources. Therefore, as part of such projects, we want to increase the capacity and improve the attractiveness of the labor resources or workforce. How can we do that? That's up to the government and that is up to us, because we don't let the government stay idle. We never let the government stay idle, and it is really important for us to cooperate in this common endeavor. Thank you. Elvira Belkacımovna, thank you very much for very detailed commentary. We agree with you. Indeed, the government will be able to keep its resources better as long as some conflicts are resolved within organizations, and as long as the as soon as the Institute of Mediation will start functioning properly. Indeed, the law on mediation is not being fully implemented, especially when it comes to disputes between corporations or some civil disputes. And we really hope that with the efforts of the UNDP, EU, and other international organizations, we will be able to integrate alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. We are talking here about the violations of rights by businesses, enterprises. And not only are we talking about the rights of employees, we're talking about the rights of those citizens who suffer from the activities of certain businesses. And one of those rights is the right to a healthy environment. Unfortunately, as the consequence of the Industrial Revolution, this right to a healthy environment is one of the most relevant problems right now. Our new project on the promoting climate smart agro technologies in Kazakhstan will be launched today at this event, and we'd like to say that agriculture of our country strongly depends on the climate situation and weather conditions. Climate change is the most important challenge to agriculture, and that's what we observe right now, because these catastrophes are being even more aggravated because of the climate impact. And in this regard, I would like to give the floor to Danara Alimbaeva, the CEO of Kaz Hydromet. Danara, please, the floor is yours. Good day, dear participants. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity to speak before such an audience and provide a presentation on the agro-meteorological services. In my presentation, I would like to touch upon the issues of climate change. Of course, we can talk a lot about climate change, but I would like to talk to you about the further steps in terms of development of agro-meteorological services. Slide number 1, please. Let me begin with the agro-meteorological information that we provide to farmers, households, and consumers. In this presentation, we decided to show the main information, for example, the information about the reserves of productive moisture in the soil, that allows farmers learn about the level of moisture in soils for them to prepare seeds, for example, or cultures, and identify the time frame for sowing. The second forecast is the forecast of recommended sowing dates for spring grain crops, or the forecast of the timing of ripening of spring grain crops. That allows the farmers to timely start, or let's say prepare for the yield collection works. And as for the yield forecast for wheat and sunflower, allows farmers to forecast the gross yield of grain, and it also helps them to timely conclude trade agreements both within the country or for export. The forecast of the agro-meteorological conditions for harvesting is crucial for farmers, as it allows them to choose the strategy in order to reduce the losses of yield. As for drought forecast for the month, it's provided from May till June, and we provide them 7 days in advance. But this is a cornerstone, I think, taking into account the experience of the previous year, which was accompanied by droughts. We can state with confidence that this problem has not been fully resolved in Kazakhstan and in other Central Asian countries. And the drought forecast, as we understand, fully depends on the forecast of the on the quality forecast of the precipitation for very long periods of time. Here I tried to briefly show with these bullet points a lot of agrometeorological information. There is a lot of information publicly available to farmers, and of course we first of all highlight our long-term weather forecasts for a season, for a month, and for 6 months. Next slide, please. So what services are provided by KazHydromet today? The entire analytical or forecast information is published on the website of KazHydromet, and it's provided to the Ministry of Agriculture. All of the agrometeorological notes are published on different internet pages or accounts. In 2020, we developed a special service for farmers. It's called Agro Data, and this service is free of charge. The entire information, agrometeorological information, is published on this application. You can find factual data, and you can even find specialized forecast information for farmers. In case of threat of emergencies or storms, we also publish messages on the upcoming storms, let's say, and starting from 2022, we began to publish the 10-day forecasts or preliminary forecasts, just to make sure that people have enough time to make decisions in advance. And we publish our drought forecasts based on the SPI. Next slide, please. I would like to say that the drought on the territory of Kazakhstan was always a threat to agriculture, but taking into account the climate change, we need to be especially careful while looking at this problem, or when looking at this problem, because the warming in Kazakhstan is happening much more rapidly compared to the rest of the world. And if we look at 1976 and compare it to 2021, the speed of the increase in the average annual temperature on a global scale is 0.18 every 10 years for Kazakhstan. It's 0.32. The year of 2021 was one of the warmest years over this period, and of course the average annual temperature goes up, and it goes up on the entire territory of Kazakhstan, not only in specific regions. The number of days with the temperature above 35 also goes up, and I would like to say that every 10 years the number of very hot days goes up as well. By 4 days. We see more heat waves, so we see the rainless days, a lot of rainless days in Mangistau, Kizlyarda, and Karagandi regions. At the same time, there is an increase in the extreme precipitation around Caspian and Aral.
And it's significantly rising, and that all leads to irrevocable changes. And that is reduction of solid precipitation, high likelihood of increasing height of return of spring frost, at high temperature, return of cold weather in the spring months will be very dangerous, increasing the height of zero isotherm in mountainous areas, reducing the zones where precipitation falls in solid forms, and a noticeable example of drought in 2021. This is a result of climate changes. So increasing dryness of climate is growing. A noticeable warming of spring months leads to intensive snowmelt and strong flooding of rivers, what KazHydromet is doing. a top priority for us, what we said, is improve a long-term fight over drought, and we began it in 2020. We studied experience of other countries, and we studied our own capacity. We improved the methodology of drought forecasting. We've revised all our practices in drought forecasting. We feel that we need to address it in Kazakhstan by using quantitative drought forecasting methods. At Kazhydromet, we adopted WRF model, so that would increase the server capacity, and we are able now to develop a prompt forecast up to 7 days with a resolution of 18 kilometers. And should we receive donors aid, we have the HR capacity, we could increase the resolution up to 4 kilometers, spatial resolution. That would be useful not only for Kazhydromet but for other state bodies, and that would be certainly handy for the farms and farmers. So we feel that the most effective way to use the donors' aid is to increase the server capacity of Kazhydromet. It's clear that we are intercontinental and we have certain distinctive features of the climate that we need to reckon with, especially in forecasting droughts. If we were to increase server capacity, that would allow us to speed up forecasting and monitor drought and take into account some features of drought that are not taken into account. These are climate zones of evaporation and other factors, and to automate prompt operational monitoring of drought. We have profound experience of working with UNDP and other project organizations. Recently, we introduced new models for sugar beet and corn with the support of UNDP, and with REDS support, we've introduced rape and rice yield models, crop yield models, and we have experience of working with scientific research institutions, with international experts. And in Kazakhstan since 2018 we are explaining, familiarizing the farms with our products, teaching them how to use it. So we established a solid contact with such farms, and many of them are taking advantage of our products, and I believe they will be ready to roll out and test at operational level our information. And having tested this mechanism to prevent drought, they will be able to replicate it in other Central Asian countries. So that was briefly it on our part. Once again, I thank you for this event, and I certainly hope and look forward to further productive collaboration aimed at decent results. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Alimbayeva, for this profound and substantial presentation. The work of Kazhydromet is useful not only for Kazakhstan in general, but also for the real farmers, for the agrarians. So as part of the new project, we hope that our collaboration would go ahead, will move forward, and you will be able to contribute on your side, and hopefully all the activities that we have planned, that we have in mind, will be carried out and will help us mitigate the negative impact on the environment. And our farmers, representatives of agriculture sector, will be able to get closer to international experience, international best practices, and adapting their business to international norms and standards. I would like now to pass the floor to representative of the National Chamber of Entrepreneurs at Atomican, Mr. Irbol Isineev. Yes, good morning, dear colleagues. Let me welcome you all and thank you for the special attention that you're paying to environment and preservation of resources. Indeed, this is highly relevant. Just would like to bring about a few examples from agriculture, representing Atomican, which is a dialogue platform between business and government. We just call it internally Association of Associations. We incorporate around 1,200,000 businesses, and more than 200,000 of them are agriculture ones. And yeah, we have experience of interacting with international counterparts. There are a few programs running that is warmly welcomed by business. It's a joint program, One Village, One Product. A significant support and positive feedback was received on female entrepreneurship, women business, and we are not only restricted by one type of entities. I'm just here speaking for agro industry. It's FAO, it's APD, it's German Kazakhstani dialect, and yeah, it's of each of those is hugely important and unique because it contributes to development of agro industry. Speaking of sector, there are a lot of limiting factors, restricting factors that were mentioned by Saulek. There are some grave risks that we may face reduction of our crop yields, of our production. But yet, if we were to implement a few proactive activities and measures, we can mitigate this risk. For example, what comes to water, annual consumption of water from surface sources is more than 30% of cubic kilometers. 60% of them is going for agriculture. Naturally, given that irrigation systems that are currently available in Kazakhstan that are used for 1.5 million hectares of lands is outdated Soviet canals that are giving us around 40% losses of water. Herewith, a huge potential that we have in accumulating meltwaters is not used. 15 kilometers of cubic water is just flowing away to the Arctic Ocean. We are not fully utilizing our opportunities, and you are viewing us as potential partners in this project. So jointly, we hope that we will be able to communicate it to our farmers the need to promptly take actions at all stages of water saving, resource-saving technologies, including that for meltwater. Speaking at the agriculture sector general level, we cannot simply copy and paste the experience of other countries. We know that since the 60s, we keep cultivating the maiden lands, mercilessly using the soil. We lost a serious threshold of humus, and we gradually build up the production of organic products. More than 300,000 hectares of lands only in plant production. We are leaders in terms of supplying organic products to Europe. And this year we're going to set another record. It's $37 million of export, and that's still not enough, because for us it's a solution for restoring some biodiversity in Kazakhstan. Naturally, we have our own distinctive features. We are a large country from east to west. It's 2.5 thousand kilometers, and north to south 1.5 thousand kilometers, and we haven't fully utilized the potential of our remote pasturing. It's the second part of our project, which is down to the lack of infrastructure in the rural area, such basic essential as electricity that would allow to extract water, that would set some basic living conditions for the shepherd. What's notable is that Japan is also one of the major buyers of our horse meat. They probably understand the importance of that business, because according to the estimate of the Nutrition Academy, hypothetically in Kazakhstan, without damaging the economy, we can be home to 150 million heads of horses and 37 million heads of sheep. So this potential is still untapped. So, given the latest geopolitical events, we understand that food security is a strategic resource, and it's not a matter of price, but just a fact of its presence of food in a country. And Kazakhstan certainly holds an advantage here and has the edge, thanks to its enormous potential. We can be a food factory for the entire region. So we just need to avoid committing the mistakes, and being the National Chamber of Atomic Energy, uniting all the entire business, we are ready to be the dialogue platform with business and with population, so that this profound experience that we have, and that we will be able to share it with our entities, to have this multiplier effect. I'm sure it's not our final meeting, and the results and the outcomes of this initiative will be communicated, brought back to you, because every positive effect will bring a lot of outcome. We have a saying in Atomic Energy, which means that each entrepreneur is unique, and matters. And if we, by joining hands, could set the right direction and show the path forward in terms of the limited resources that we have in Kazakhstan, this will be hugely positive. Okay, dear Irbol, thank you very much for your presentation, the statement. The involvement of small and medium enterprises in the agro industry is one of the key components of the project and its component of climate change. And we hope that our partners for carbon neutrality will be expanding also in agriculture. And we'd also like to note here that at the level of Atomic Energy management, special attention will be paid to promotion of the guiding principles in the human rights. And as part of the second project that we mentioned earlier, we will have a business academy, and we have a special study or survey, and certainly we hope that it will be incorporated Once again, many thanks to all the speakers and participants of the panel discussion. I see that we have representatives of Samruk Energy, Kazenergy, Kazatomprom, of the trade union. Maybe you have some comments, or would you like to share how at the level of your organizations social guarantees and human rights are guaranteed? I think there was a volunteer from Samruk Energy. Samruk Energy is a participant of the Global Compact of UN and is submitting annual reports. And I know that you're doing some on annual regular basis. If you can share some comments and feedback. Representatives of the UN Global Compact. The information about the progress achieved is uploaded at the UN website, Global Compact, and we stick to the principles. We introduce ESG principles, and we are trying and contribute our input into Sustainable Development Goals. We recently updated our strategies that was written through the prism of ESG principles, and we are now doing our global effort in this area. As for the introduction of these principles, it's becoming cross-cutting. We are now at transformation phase. We pick up the trends of energy transition that was made Kazakhstan-wide, nationwide, and we are working in this direction as well. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Would you like to inform us about your work in terms of social corporate responsibility, how you're working with the society, and how are you promoting the rights of your employees inside your enterprise? Anyone? Hi, everyone. The topic of our conversation today is highly relevant and vast, but what I was keen to hear is that in promoting projects you need to observe all rights of not only business but also human rights, labor rights. That certainly relates to us, and we heard from the ambassador you cannot tolerate discrimination and other signs of labor right violation. I would like to add a little bit more. Our dear Commissioner for Human Rights spoke in general about human rights, while we specialize on labor rights. And here is what I have to say here. What I have to tell, we receive complaints not after exhausting other preliminary remedies. We may have some say over resolution of conflict situation at the earlier stages. This by giving some labor counseling, enforcement of the decision. We have a lot of levers that have bearing on the employers. Well, there is a lot of points that I would like to put forward. Probably I will not be able to mention them all because you caught me on spot and off guard. And the project looks really interesting to us. And all Sustainable Development Goals that UN is promoting, yeah, we relate ourselves to them really closely. That seems to be highly interesting, and we look forward to further cooperation.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to mention once again that when we did the project presentation, we said that we'd have webinars, different discussion platforms, and the Business Academy will be inviting the representatives of the trade unions, because we want to create a dialogue platform to bring together employees and employers. And we really hope that this platform will help raise a lot of issues and find out some internal mechanisms within corporations and businesses to make sure that the rights of people are not violated or the violation of the rights are prevented. Thank you very much. Anyone else is willing to talk or make a comment? Thank you all. Then I suggest that we switch to the final part of our event. I really hope that the participants could better understand the goals and objectives of the projects. The first one is on business and human rights promotion, and the second project is on promoting climate change, smart agro technologies in Kazakhstan. So I'd like to give the floor for final remarks to the representative of the UNDP. Sukhrov, the floor is yours. Can I ask a question? Yes, please introduce yourself and ask your question. My name is Zhanay Sagintayev. I'm from NU. I have a question about agriculture. I have a question about the effective agriculture without harming environment. Growing grain means growing monoculture, but we have a lot of naturally growing drought-resistant plants, and they're actually some kind of drought-resistant weed which are prohibited in Kazakhstan. So even if this weed is really strong and resistant to drought, or let's say there are other plants which are drought resistant and have a lot of export potential, are you taking them into consideration? Have you looked at other international practices? Maybe that's the question to be posed to Atamican, because a lot of plants are just being destroyed in the country, even if they have a really good export potential, and they have been processed in Kazakhstan historically. So that's my question. I see Yerbol Yurkenovich is willing to answer this question. Actually, we are actively involved in this process, and as for the licorice, root of licorice, it's allowed to the government actually, when cultivating these cultures, allows its export. As for hemp, well, this question is quite complicated. We cannot really convince the Ministry of Interior that some hemp types have zero content of cannabis, but our law enforcement agencies always want to be more vigilant. The demand, of course, is very high for hemp. Maybe this is a signal to the rural population. If we look at the wild plants, there is a huge demand for wild plants. For example, if you go to Borovoy, you see that sea buckthorn is really popular there. And if we integrate a certain culture of growing or processing of some plants, the demand for them would be really high. And that refers to all wild plants growing in forests or growing on the territories of all the regions of our country. The National Chamber of Entrepreneurs has the project office on organic plants, and I mentioned it briefly. There is also the Kazakh-German agrarian dialogue that helps us with attracting experts, and we can actually work with them by offering our solutions, or we can even work up until the sales market level. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Yerbol Yurkenovich. Your response was quite informative, and I think that our colleagues on Zoom are satisfied with your answer. Okay, dear Zoom participants, do you have any other questions while we have a couple of minutes left? If there are no questions, then I suggest that we wrap up. The floor goes to Mr. Sukhrob Khajmarov. Please. Thank you. Dear colleagues, dear friends, on behalf of the UNDP, I would like to thank you once again for your participation. I would like to especially thank our panelists, Your Excellency, Elvira Abulkasimovna. Thank you very much for your informative statements. I'd like to thank the colleagues from Atamican and Kaz Hydromed, and the information that you provided was quite brief, but nevertheless, it is very important because it's subject to a lot of analysis, and it comes from your experience, and I was really happy to get practical answers to questions or practical recommendations. I personally took notes, and especially when you were talking about the business ombudsperson who would help with promoting rights of consumers. I really loved the presentation of His Excellency on Green Deals or the strategies that the European Union is implementing on the territory of Kazakhstan. And I'm talking about the sustainable development projects, the projects in the field of rule of law. The presentation of the representative of Atamican was also of a huge practical significance. I'd like to thank the colleague from Kaz Hydromed. Thank you for the analytical information that you provide. We'll do our best to find additional resources because I believe that one of the main criteria for adaptation to climate change is forecasting. And that is why creating relevant infrastructure or conditions for farmers and entrepreneurs would be highly relevant. I'd like to thank you for this online platform that every farmer in Kazakhstan can use or has access to. Today, we are starting 2 new projects, but they're not really new. They are going to work in a conventional mode together with our government and non-governmental structures. I would like to personally thank Mr. Yamada, His Excellency. The implementation of these projects was carried out under his strict supervision. We had a lot of business correspondence, meetings with the representatives of the MFA and the embassy, and the facilitation on your side helped us get really good results. I'd like to thank our team. I'd like to thank our colleagues who organized this event, who worked on the agenda, on sending the invitations. And since this was my first public statement, for your information, I just arrived in Kazakhstan. Yesterday was a 1-month anniversary of my presence here. And I'm really encouraged by the enthusiasm and by the efforts expressed by colleagues here today. Madam Azimova said that she was really glad to see a lot of young people sitting here, and I believe that the main resource that we all have is your youth and your enthusiasm. And we, as the traditional donor, the European Union and the Japanese embassy, as well as the Kazakh government, will do our best to make sure that a lot of your ideas and startups could be properly implemented, because I think that they will fully comply with the development goals that Kazakhstan has signed up for. And I am talking about the national development goals of Kazakhstan as well, in the light of recent reforms declared by President Tokayev. Thank you very much for your participation. And it was the ceremonial day, let's say. We will start our work tomorrow. Thank you. Dear colleagues, good day. I would like to thank you all for taking part in the management committee, steering committee. This is the meeting of partners. We actually have the translation. Sorry, I didn't mention it right away. We have simultaneous interpretation from English to Russian and vice versa. Feel free to use your headsets. Project Management Committee is the special assembly of all of the partners of the project, people who help implement the projects. And I think that it's more like a lobbyist organization that helps project get as much help as possible from government authorities and NGOs, as well as international organizations. And for the first time, we have here another international organization in addition to UNDP. I thank you for being here. Thanks for coming. And I'm talking about the Japanese Agency on International Cooperation. I just wanted to say that at one point I attended a training provided by JICA, and that training was devoted to climate change issues. And I mentioned it briefly during the break. A lot of my colleagues attended this training, and it would be really good for such trainings to continue. Maybe we'd come up with something great as part of this project. I also want to welcome everyone who is connected to this meeting via Zoom. We have a few colleagues from the Ministry of Agriculture. There are some Zoom participants, so I suggest that we begin our meeting. We have documents. Unfortunately, we couldn't have time. We didn't have enough time to translate these documents into English. We have the agenda of the committee. We have the minutes. The minutes are not final. You can share your remarks, your comments, and we also have the action plan that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. I would like to ask our colleagues to introduce yourselves so that we know who is attending this committee meeting. Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to Shatek. Thank you, Saulet. Dear participants and members of the Project Management Committee, I would like to welcome you all on behalf of the Ministry of the Ecology, Geology and Natural Resources. As a lot of speakers noted earlier in their statements, climate change is one of the issues on the agenda that everyone is concerned about, and particularly the Central Asian countries are the most vulnerable ones. We receive a lot of requests and, let's say, addresses from farmers and agrarians who are facing such problems as drought or other natural calamities. And we are primarily interested in this project because despite the fact that last year we adopted the new environmental code that takes into account the adaptation to climate change, and even if we adopted the laws and regulations that regulate each and every stage of the adaptation process, the practical implementation is lagging behind because there are not so many practical projects. That is why I really like this project, as we selected the pilot sites in different regions in the north and in the west, and that actually means that this project is going to be successfully implemented, and I really think that each and every one will spare no efforts to successfully implement this project. I would like to wish fruitful work to all of you. Thank you very much, Shatek. I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Evgeny Hon, who is the counselor to the resident representative. Thank you, Saulet. Good day, dear colleagues. On behalf of the UNDP in Kazakhstan, I would like to welcome all of you at this Project Management Committee session. A lot of things have been said about its relevance and activities that will be implemented here in Kazakhstan. It should be noted that the UNDP adheres to the principles of whole of the nation and social approaches, and thus it involves different stakeholders and key players to the implementation of sustainable development goals of the Global Agenda 2030. One of the central principles of that agenda that Kazakhstan is a party to is to leave no one behind. And today's committee session is a real reflection of that principle in action. We have here key government stakeholders, the academic circles, international organizations, as Saulet mentioned. In addition to the UNDP, we have others, and we are really glad. I just want to wish very productive work to everyone. We're now talking about the working level, and we really hope for your active engagement, interesting discussions, and I really hope that this project will be successfully implemented in accordance with the priorities that Kazakhstan has. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you, Evgeny. Maybe the members of the PMC now can introduce themselves, or how about I introduce you and you'll just say a couple of words on your side. We have here the representative of Kaz Hydromet, Madam Layenka. We've been working with her a lot, and we are now in close cooperation with each other in terms of how this project can assist Kaz Hydromet. So the floor is yours. Hello, I'm really glad. This is my first involvement in a project, and that this participation does not necessarily mean some involvement at the planning stage. We are ready to declare our needs. It is really good to see that such projects are being implemented, because they will help us use the assistance or help more effectively. I believe that we have a lot of things to discuss. At any rate, on our side, we will be we'll try to cover, or let's say, we will try to use our entire potential in order to satisfy the needs of our consumers, particularly farmers. Since 2018, we've been in close cooperation with all of the farmers. We are always in touch. There are certain, let's say, structures or enterprises with which we have established very good dialogue. And I'm talking about the dialogue between Kaz Hydromet and farmers. We also have some wishes coming from farmers, which we didn't implement. And I really hope that we will see some significant effect of this work. Thank you. Thank you. Please, Sel, you wanted to say something? No? Oh, all right. Then I'd like to give the floor to Madam Aya Ita. Just a couple of words on your side about JICA.
Английском.
You can say it in English.
Nice to meet you. My name
Thank you very much. It's really great. We have Zoom participants can also introduce themselves. It's Berik Manasov from the Department of International Cooperation and Attraction of Investments of the Ministry of Agriculture of Kazakhstan. Can you just introduce yourself or say a couple of words about yourself? Yes, dear colleagues, hi, can you hear me? Yes, we can, thank you. Hello again. On behalf of the Ministry of Agriculture of Kazakhstan, I'm glad to welcome you at the PMC. I apologize for not being there in person, but my online participation hopefully will not affect the productivity of our group. We are interested in this work and we attach a great significance to this project, and we really hope to work together fruitfully. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, dear Berik. Real pleasure to have you with us. We also have a representative from the Ministry of the Embassy of Japan, Mr. Takashige Kabayashi. Maybe you would like to say a few words as well. Then we have everyone with us. Kabayashi has some issues with the sound, but hopefully he will get connected a bit later. So I would like to move on and do my presentation. I would like to show you the draft plan. So here we have the name of the project. We do have a very lengthy name, but the main goal is again supporting the agriculture in Kazakhstan to make it prepared to climate change. And I would like to tell you why do we have the project steering committee. It helps you basically steer the project, sets the goals and objectives, sets the general direction. It ensures the cooperation between the national institutions and international institutions. We can all come together at different moments in times and negotiate some issues and steer the project. We will do our best to provide full access, free access to all documents that will be prepared as part of the project, and also we are certainly hoping that all state and non-state actors will be able to participate in the project steering committee. I did the presentation in 2 languages, so therefore you see the English version on the same slide. We move to the next one. It's provided methodological and practical assistance to the project manager, it's me and the project team in general. We have a few people in the on the team. It's myself. It's also Saber, who is there next to computers. We have a PR specialist. It's Aijan, and she's probably writing some posts now regarding this event, and the entire team will be working hard to make sure that the project was efficiently executed, and we also review and approve the project annual progress report. Just like today, we are making a plan, but at some point closer to the end of the year, or maybe the beginning next year, we will come together and try to review what's been done. So it's the main coordination body, so it's our joint goal, if I may say so. Inside the UN program, there are a few modalities regarding the project implementation. In this regard, by modality, we mean it's direct implementation by UN itself. So UNDP makes a decision how and what will be done. And also, sometimes this modality does not require creating such a project management committee, but we, as a public institution that seeks partnership, we always try to set up such a project management committee, and we invite national and international partners to participate. So it's our goodwill, in other words. And now we have two components. I told you about it during the seminar. The first component will be about technologies for agriculture for transition to low carbon development. Agriculture is our second emitter of greenhouse gases, but does not have any limitations in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And we would like here to offer some technologies. We'll need to decide on project territories where will be implemented, select these technologies where will be implemented, yeah, we will be seeking to implement it with the partners. The second component is technological development of KazHydromet. It's assistance for KazHydromet to predict these droughts and build the capacity of local executive authorities to make them prepared and equipped to respond to droughts in case of the realization. And if they are informed, they will have some instructions at hand how to act in case of a drought, so that the assets that they have under management. The total budget is $964,000. The implementation period is August and March. The first component, which I mentioned before, is drive investments in clean energy, a lot of subcomponents, but it's all coming down to selection and installation of renewable energy sources at these farms, then jointly with the Japanese colleagues to draw instructions. So at these typical farms where we will set it up, we will need to share the instructions and then communicate it and inform other farmers regarding how they can reduce their footprint. And we will also need to install technologies for curtailing water consumption, or in case of water supply, for the scenario of drought, it's for the existing wells, or new wells will be built to allow access to water for agriculture and livestock sector. So it would all be replacing, it will be electric motors, but they will be fed by energy from renewable sources. We will be introducing some digital solutions for accounting and monitoring of this source. We'll try to digitize our agriculture. Currently, it's progressing, but we would like to speed this up, scale this up, and fewer than 2 smart technologies in agriculture. We'll install watering systems, and watering will be determined by the importance of soil and land. If it's pretty wet and watering is not required, it will not be done, and it will all be done with the help of specially tailored technology, and the farmer will make the ultimate decision. This is our first component. We also hope certain farms to be covered, around 10, and around 1,000 beneficiaries. The second component here is going to see us cooperating with KazHydromet, and our hydrometeorological service will need to be analyzed. It's been gradually starting. We've been meeting and cooperating. We were getting to know what problems there were. We need to assess their capability for prevention of droughts and try to optimize it with the view for drought to inflict as little damage as possible. We will install our software and most likely special servers, what was mentioned by Danara Kizatovna during the seminar. So special server will be needed for the to draw information from different systems, and then it later can be applied for prevention of droughts. And we'll have a think tank, a small one, with the people creating indication systems in Kazakhstan. And yeah, the system, the model that they will be drawing and designing will be installed at their working stations. We will be coming forward with some publications. We will do field monitoring activities. So the technologies that will be against those technologies that will be installed and what will be done at Kazhydromet, we will be inviting our partners, and the project steering committee will join us to monitor all these activities that we are going to carry out. So basically that's it from my side. If you have any further questions or offers, there is my mobile phone number and my email. I hope there's no mistakes here. You please feel free to share your feedback. It can be immediate, it can be later on after you review all documents. I would like to ask those online to please share your email via chat box in Zoom, and Saber will share it. Yeah, so feel free to reach out with me whichever way works best for you, by email or phone. Does anyone have any ideas to share? Any comments? Any questions? Anything? I have a question. It's Berik Manasov. I look at the first component, and the first point here. It's selection and installation of renewable energy sources, at least for a certain number of farmers. Has this work been going on? Was it started? Yeah, it's a pretty short project, and we had to urgently start it. It's going in parallel, simultaneously, and we also work now with the National Chamber of Entrepreneurs at Amiken to select those technologies and the farms that will be hosting it. It's not been finalized yet, so later on with Amiken we will be assessing that. We will come up with a set of criteria for the farms. We will decide where they will be installed jointly with you, and then later be proceeded. Okay, let's stay in touch on this one. Yes, Ministry of Agriculture should be also engaged in this one. I will put it down into the protocol. Yeah, the same holds true for other points and sub points. Okay, I will put it into the minutes that we need to provide for participation of Ministry of Agriculture and other relevant stakeholders who would wish to participate. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, without other questions, in the absence of those, I'm sorry I lost my agenda. Then I guess we're ready to wrap up. For that, I would like to pass the floor to Evgeny and Shatik. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Saulet. It's a real pleasure to have Ministry of Agriculture interest in that project. I would like to highlight that we really press for time, and we have cold months waiting for us in the future that will complicate our interaction with the farmers, especially in the northern Kazakhstan. The weather conditions are harsh, so I think we all need to step it up to make it one success. Thank you very much. Really productive and a quick session. I hope I will continue working in the same fashion.